All right, welcome to One EMS. I'm Charles McFall, and I'm here to talk about anything and everything under the sun when it comes to EMS and ask all the questions so perhaps we can get some answers and make some changes for the positive. I'm with Summer
Patterson.
I'm sorry, I didn't remember your last name, but I got Summer down.
That's right.
Not fall, not winter. Got Summer down.
That's right. Absolutely.
And what is your position here at Bryan County?
So my position here at Bryan County, I am Deputy Chief of Emergency Management and Division Chief of EMS.
Those are two big titles. Two big titles.
They really
are.
They are.
What is, in a nutshell, what does that mean you do?
So on the emergency management side, pretty much we do hurricane preparedness leading up to hurricane season. The rest of the year is just spent creating exercises we work with the other agencies in the county, say for instance the law enforcement agencies, and we'll go through drills. We have a mobile command unit for the county. So that participates in active shooter drills. During the pandemic, I have been responsible for basically making resource requests for PPE for our department, as well as for the other municipalities in the county, so Richmond Hellfire and the law enforcement agencies as well. So it can be a gamut of things. It's, working with the state and the Red Cross on, say, sheltering plans and evacuation plans, and so it's a lot. It's a very diverse and a very varied position.
Sounds like a lot of paperwork.
It is. Yeah. That's a lot of people say that. That's a lot of paperwork. It is, but it's a great job.
So your background, did you come up through fire first, through EMS, or kind of joint together?
So EMS. I am very, very, very heavy on the EMS background. I started EMT school in 1996 and became an EMT.
I went then in 96 as well.
Finished in 97. Back then took you about a year to do it.
Yeah. So, I think mine was like 9 months. Yeah.
Right. So, and I was an intermediate. So EMT and became an intermediate.
Yeah, where we could actually do things, not just, I'm just playing.
Exactly.
Well, I mess with my EMT basics nowadays, like, I had to stick needles and put tubes in people when I was an EMT.
Right.
Yeah.
So, that was in 97. So I worked part-time. Then I was working full-time actually in ophthalmology practice, which was hospital-based, or the EMS that I was working for part-time was, hospital-based, and then I transferred full-time into EMS in 2003. Immediately started paramedic school. Never wanted to be a paramedic, but I was recovering from carpal tunnel surgery. So the hiring manager said, "Hey, you start here this day and you start paramedic school the next day." And I was like, "Oh, wait, you're confused. I don't want to be a paramedic." And he was like, "No, you start paramedic school." And I was like, "That's not right. I don't want to be paramedic." And he goes, "Listen, if you want to be hired, I can't pay you to sit around for 8 weeks while your hand heals. So guess what? Congratulations."
So they paid for you to go to paramedic school?
They did. It was
nice.
this was a situation. It was hospital-based, so it was right here in Savannah at Memorial. And so paramedic school was every Monday, and so I worked my shifts, and then they worked around my clinicals and my school schedule. So then a year later, I was a paramedic, and so I've been in EMS ever since. Spent a little time doing some volunteer. I obtained my firefighter one through Port Wentworth Fire and volunteered with them for a little bit. And but mainly EMS until I started in emergency management.
Gotcha. And how do you feel like being a medic prepared you for what you do today versus maybe, because I know where you're at, you can see the fire path. Would fire path have prepared you better? I know differently is always a thing, but do you think it would have been better, or do you think becoming through EMS has prepared you better to do the emergency management?
So I think my background was I think it sort of equally the time that I spent like with the volunteer firefighting and going through, my firefighter one. And when I was working for the EMS service full time, we rotated out of all of our stations were fire departments. So we worked really closely with fire. So even though I wasn't in the fire service full time, I got a lot of exposure to that side of sort of public safety. So I believe that with the heavy background in EMS, the time in fire, that it really sort of prepared the way to, kind of just create this really natural sort of ease into and transition into emergency management.
Good. You and I came up basically at the same time, it sounds like, almost exactly the same time. I saw some very bad behavior from men in EMS towards females in EMS. What was some of the challenges you had to overcome that perhaps nobody should really have to overcome?
So, and that is a subject that, it's not that it makes me uncomfortable talking about, but I hate that exists and that did exist.
And it still does in places.
And I never want to be that person who's like, oh, well, these are the experiences that I had. Woe is me or poor little me, because that, I've always.
It doesn't define you.
Right, exactly. But I can remember instances like it was yesterday, even though we're talking 15, 20 years ago, of situations that just things that were said that, never should have been said. And even then when, sexual harassment or what wasn't even necessarily as big as it is a big of an issue, but I can remember being taken aback a couple of times and it wasn't just the folks that were on, boots on the ground, just like me. This came from, there was a chief in a particular, and it's funny because all of those occasions, I could take you to the very spot where those things happened now. So it was definitely present. It wasn't something that you talked about. It wasn't necessarily something that there was some recourse to it, or, hey, if this is going on, let somebody, this isn't acceptable behavior, and let's see if we can eliminate that. So you just kind of, for me, it was present. I took it in stride, and just kind of moved past it.
I've seen a lot coming up through my career I remember you talking about through the 90s, mid to late 90s, sexual harassment became much bigger buzzwords around corporate America. And that's where it started. I mean, it's a real thing. I'm not putting it down. It's definitely a bad thing. But it became buzzy at first. And then I remember I probably was that asshole that was in there too, going, not harassing, but going, this is EMS. We don't have sexual harassment here. We're just doing our jobs.
Right.
Which is not true, because I fortunately did not see, nor did I participate in the actual propositioning or putting in weird positions and all those things. And it's a weird path to navigate through EMS. Because we will talk about blowing off steam with dark jokes. And we will I've heard people make, racist jokes and sexist jokes and homophobic jokes. And with diversity at the table, we're all just laughing along because it's blowing off steam, and there's that fine line of that versus really where you cross lines. And my biggest issue coming out was the good old boys club. Being young, I was always, for 4 or 5 years of my career, I was the youngest and you just fill in the blank. I'm in that company and whatever. Obviously not having some of the same issues as you did, being female, but it's like, well, you don't know anything. You're young. You're new. Your ideas are dumb, or we've always done it this way. So I can imagine, unfortunately, that some of that was worse. But even nowadays, I was talking with Brian Haney, the owner of Trinity and Life Care EMS, about how even in there with a smaller company, and I'm the COO of that company, and I've tried to build an atmosphere of community and growth. And it blows me away. I still have to deal with some people with some sexist behavior. I'm like, are you serious? I've always worked well with female bosses. I try to open up a path to anybody can work anything, just do the job. And we have many female leaders in our company, and I still go, you really? You're going to tell me yes and do it immediately, and you're not going to tell her yes and do it immediately. I don't understand that. So what do you do now that you're at the top? How are you making a better way for people? So
for me, and I still consider myself this position and the role that I'm in a very new role. I was appointed to the role or transitioned into it in
like paramedic school.
Exactly. Basically transitioned into the position in June, and then that was quickly followed by my chief and I attended the National Hurricane Conference, so we were out of town for a week. And then a week after that, I was out of town for another week. And so it's been sort of in between the responsibilities that I have, to make sure that I'm, adequately equipped for the job by classes and training conferences that I'm obligated to attend, while trying to be in the position and fill out the position. And because it is a new position, there's also that sort of odd intermediate area where it's, okay, well, let's sort of, how do we, between myself and the deputy chief, on on the fire side of things and the division chief of training on the fire side of things, figuring out, okay, what's your roles now? What's my roles now? Who's going to do this?
Sure.
And so it has definitely been sort of a slow sort of figuring it out and process. But for me, I think, and maybe part of it is because I've been in public safety for so long. Sometimes I joke and say, oh, well, it's just because it's because I'm a woman and there's hormones and emotion, or it's because I'm a mom. But I think for me, I find myself, I'm a talker. So I like to talk to people, and when the opportunity presents, and I think that's, sort of in this really good position, because when I first came in, I came in part-time as an emergency management specialist. So I didn't really have any authority, and I was kind of just in this great position where no one was like if I walked in the room, no one felt inclined to, oh, well, let's change our conversation because Summer walked in. That kind of thing. So that I feel really fortunate that I have, as I was finishing school and obtained my degree, that I went from, okay, the emergency management specialist that's here a couple of times a week to, oh, well, now she's here full time, but I still don't have authority, so to speak, and people still felt comfortable. And the greatest thing in the world to me is several of the folks that are in the department. I've also been in EMS education for a very long time. So there are a lot of people in the department that I taught EMT class. Some of the classes, we had a gentleman in yesterday from one of our aeromedical companies that he's a flight medic, and he came and taught a class for us. And as he was teaching, he made reference to, oh yeah, Summer, you taught some of my paramedic classes. And so I think that also gives me a little bit of an advantage. So for me, it's, being able to, be present in conversations and included, where I don't think there's, now that it's weird because now I'll walk into rooms and they're like, hey, chief. And I'm like, oh, wait, they're talking to me. But to me, I really embrace the fact that thus far, I haven't necessarily seen a change where folks feel like, oh, well, let's change our conversation. Summer just walked in, and so I think that to me right now, I'm sort of still in that, in that phase where let me just really listen and kind of figure out, get a pulse of the talk that's going on, the concerns, the sort of repetitive comments that are being made, to begin to formulate an idea of, okay, what are the things that are important, that the conversation topics that kind of continue to present?
And it does sound like, to that point of making a better way for everybody, it sounds like, again, you took a little bit of similar path of the instruction. A lot of people work for me now. Even though I didn't interact with them directly, you watch all the lectures by video, and I did 90% of them. So they got to know me and get to see how I am, and nothing really changes. I mean, there's a slight different tone between instructing and working for me. But it sounds like you've slowly but surely, in a good way, built up that way to where you're going to have people surrounding you that when somebody new comes in or transfers in from another, and all they know you is the chief.
Right.
And they're going, no, she's fair. She'll listen to you. And that's all we can ever hope for.
Right? Exactly.
It's like, I'm going to listen to you. I need you to listen to me. And if you don't, unfortunately, that's when I have to put the authority down on it. But if we can leave that off the table, that'd be the best thing.
Exactly. It makes those conversations a lot easier.
So you're telling me before we got started that recently you were having a conversation about how EMS has changed and what you're working on. What was the heart of that conversation?
The heart of it, I'd suppose, and like I said, it's just completely uncanny that like 6 hours ago I was standing outside, in the light rain, just kind of shooting the bull with the oncoming and offgoing crews, and a little bit of it with myself and one of the paramedics that's a little more senior on the department was telling the young kids like all the things that we used to do and how much from equipment to procedures, how much of that stuff has changed, but leading into sort of having a plan. Basically, the heart of it was, hey, this is where we are. But again, for those folks who are newer on the department, do you have a plan? Is your plan that this is what you're going to do forever? Because there are folks and we have folks with us that, are in their early 60s. They are lifers. And I can't even imagine some of the folks that work with us, like what they saw.
Sure.
When they started compared to where they are now. But, is that what's your plan? Do you have a plan? We were talking about EMS education and basically technical, paramedic, degrees through technical schools and where that could take you versus, okay, are you just going to transition from paramedic? Or are you planning on going to nursing? What really are your options once you, on the EMS side of things, once you become a paramedic? What do you do now? What's next? Where do you have to go? What choices do you have? So that was kind of the heart of
I love that you're just talking about that. One of the things I always talk about is, and I'm trying to change this, and I don't know how, I'm just always focused on moving this goalpost, or moving towards the goal. I don't know. I'm changing it. Where there's no career in EMS. You become an EMT. For us, you become an EMTI and a medic, and that was it. Right. Now there's EMT advanced and medic. Then what do? You leave the field and go into nursing. You go to PA. You'll leave the field, go to a desk. If you're not in fire, now if you're fire and you did both, you still have some of a career. But fire's always had that career separate of EMS. So you start as a rookie, and if you want to, you do the steps. You take the test. You prove yourself, and you can do this, you can do this, you can do this. And even as chief, I talked with the chief earlier, I said, even if a call goes out tonight as the head chief of everything, you can still go out and sing. And if you want to, be like, hey, tap him on the shoulder. Let me have that hose. And you can leave if you want to. But EMS, I'm sitting on a desk, and I'm happy with that because I'm making a way for other people to work. But I can't necessarily just go jump on that ambulance and run that cardiac arrest today, because I got other things I got to get done. It's different. This is what I'm talking to you now. I'd love to see the future of EMS have two positions that aren't there now. One is on-staff psychologist, right? To see the signs, to coach people, and not just like you see on TV with NYPD where there's a shooting, you got to talk to the staff psychologist, they got to clear you. No, I mean, hey, I'm having a hard time at home. I'm having a hard time this, or they see, hey, I see there's changes going on. Let me talk to you, and they can talk to somebody. And then the other thing I'd like to see is a career coach. Right. Somebody like you're asking, and that's why I ask in my interviews when I hire somebody, what's your career goals? And it almost stumps them every time.
I do too.
And or they go, well, I want to do 911 because we're not a non-911 company. I say, well, I get that. I talk about how I can help them in their career. But ultimately, what you're talking about is like, I remember the day, see if you have a similar moment, when somebody came in, it's like, yeah, I'm leaving EMS, I'm going to go be a PA or go be a nurse. I can't remember which one it was, but they were leaving to go do something else. Like, why? Why would you ever leave this? Man, we're helping people. We're out there, and I'm not a firefighter. You go fight the fire. I got the water for you and come out. But we're on the fire scenes. We're on the car wrecks. Why would you leave this? And a few years later, I'm like, oh yeah, now I want to do something different with my life now. Right. So what have you done in your career to combat the burnout, which can lead up to it, and to position yourself to get where you are today? So for myself personally, for as long as I can remember, and I've often sat and thought, where did this come from? So if all of my peers were paramedics, then it was like, oh, well, I want to be like everybody else. So then the very first thing I did was I talked to my paramedic instructor about, well, I want to be an instructor. So I pretty much immediately went out and got my ACLS and PALS BLS instructor. When I started paramedic school, I was like, well, I really see we're getting some really bad EMTs coming in the door that are brand new and they have these terrible attitudes. And how's that even possible? Yeah. When you've not even yet. Right, your boots haven't hit the ground. Yes. And I sat here and spent a lot of time thinking about it. I was like, well, the only thing because as an EMT, I wasn't eligible to be a field training officer or anything. And I thought, well, the only thing that I really can do is go become an instructor. Because then I know how I feel about the profession. I know how I feel about people in general. Sure. And I feel pretty confident because over the years I've stayed friends with many, many, many of my students. And I can't even venture to guess how many students I've had over the years. But to this day, even though I haven't been teaching, full-time classes in quite some time, I still have students that I'm friends with on social media and they're like, oh, you're the best instructor. And I think it's because I genuinely had, a passion for the profession. And I genuinely felt like that standing in front of a classroom
that was the easiest avenue for me to hopefully sort of impart some of that wisdom and share some of that passion, because I do believe that it's contagious. Just as being around negative people, like a really positive person can very easily become a negative person. And so that's kind of what I felt. I was like, well, I'm pretty passionate about this. And so that incitement and that enthusiasm, it was the coolest thing in the world to stand in front of a classroom and see those light bulbs start to turn. I was like, okay, this is good, which I think is why I've stayed plugged into education as long as I have. And so that for me, I think all of the years, I never knew that emergency management, like back in the early 2000s, like emergency management wasn't even on the radar.
Right,
For me, as a paramedic, it was kind of like the only thing where we could go was, oh, you're going to go be a nurse,
Exactly.
And there were some things that I was like, I don't want to be a nurse. Like, I don't want to do that.
I don't want, and no offense to nurses, they do a lot of good work, but I worked literally side by side with them in an ER, and in that hospital, the nurses were a downgrade.
Right.
Because they weren't allowed to use their ACLS, but because I was an acting paramedic in the ER, I could just go do. I could start lines without permission. I could do ACLS. I could shock. I could do all of that. But they couldn't. If they were to touch it, they would have gotten censured or fired.
Right.
And so for me coming up through the field, it felt like a downgrade, even though it was definitely an upgrade on education because you had a degree and you knew more stuff than I did, and an upgrade on pay and career.
Absolutely.
But I didn't want to lose my skills. I got to do, and you don't get to do.
And the autonomy, to me, the autonomy of
you trust me to make a decision.
Exactly. And so I just, over the years, that's what I did, is for every milestone that I reached, I was like, oh, well, I can do more than this. I can do more. And so I just would, everything that I could get my hands on, classes, and I would do crazy. I'd sit back and I'm like, man, Summer, I would volunteer for things. And, for instance, back when I was working for the county, 911 service in Chatham County, Governor's Office of Highway Safety, every month they had like the monthly safety meetings with the different law enforcement agencies. And so for months and months and months, I volunteered to be a paramedic because at one of the checkpoints, roadblocks, there was an incident. And there was kind of a near miss with an officer getting injured. Ooh. And I grew up working on the west side of the county. So these guys were my friends. These guys were the guys that I was working scenes with. And I was like, nope, I'm going to go be your paramedic. And so for months I would volunteer. And so finally the officers were like, are you getting paid for this? And I was like, absolutely not. I want to be here because I want to make sure you guys are squared away. And so they went to my chief on my behalf and they're like, hey, you need to pay her to do this. And so with that, that just kind of earned me a little more, there were lots of accommodations for that. I mean, I didn't do it for accolades and I didn't do it for recognition, but that opened the doors for some other opportunities and just years and years of, hey, let me do something that I see as a need that maybe other people aren't doing. And, I just kind of got lucky and it looks really good on a resume and I've got a really strong background and it just, everything sort of has fallen into place too. And this opportunity at Bryan County opened up and it's been fantastic.
And it's goodwill. I talked with the chief about, he's talking about how people leave for 15 cents, 50 cents, $1, but it's not offer more. And I call them the tip of the nose people. And coming from an educator background and where you are now, we'll lead into how do you break through to that mentality? Because what you just said, you did it not just because you wanted to help your friends. That was like the second or third answer you gave. You did it because I can always do more. I can do better. And you saw an investment in time and energy investing in yourself.
Right.
Where I've met so many people in my career. If you don't pay me, why I don't do that? We pay very well at our company. And I still get the jokes, and every joke has a little bit of truth in it. The joke's like, well, you're going to pay me more? And I've shut that down because that's the one time you'll see me get really mean really fast. And I'm not a mean person. I was like, I'll just start breaking it down. Like, why don't you go work somewhere else for a month?
Right.
And see how they, not just how they treat you, but how they do. That's not to my point, but it's that tip of the nose of, I can't see the value in what I have. How do you break through to those people? In school, it's a student that just, well, why do I have to read the book? Why do I have to pass this thing? Why do I have to do this homework? And then in careers, it's always the why do I have to or what are you going to pay me? How do you break through to that mentality?
Okay. So I think I take probably some of the things like my background and just my experiences coming through public safety, and what sort of gave me staying power and sticking power. And that's the type of approach and presentation that I use with some of, basically our folks now, the folks that are inside the department. So for me, it was opportunities, like where I was. What opportunities did I have where I was versus what opportunities would I have somewhere else? And so I stayed with the department that I was at. So basically, it was affiliated with Memorial. So as I said, although I didn't start full-time with Memorial with the ambulance service, I think I was employed at Memorial. I started in 1995, and then I finished, I want to say it was 2011, when the ambulance service went out of business. And so I was going on 16 years, I believe, with Memorial. There were opportunities, and I had been offered opportunities with other services, and even I worked for rescue training for a while. I worked full-time for Savannah Tech for a while, and so I had opportunities to go other places and do other things that probably could have made me more money. But at MedStar, where I was employed full-time, the opportunities were, for what I loved doing, which was helping people. I had a lot of opportunities. When I was at MedStar, I had the opportunity. I inquired about becoming a peer counselor. So when CISM, was a big thing, like, oh, well, yeah, sure, we'll send you to a class. So I got to go to the class. I had children that were smaller at the time, so car seats was a big thing, safety. So, oh yeah, you want to go to a car seat class? Go to a car seat class. And pretty much anything that I asked them, that, hey, can I do this? And they were like, well, sure. And so to me, I saw a lot of value in that. So that's basically what I try to do here. And sometimes I don't think people realize, especially the folks that are kind of newer in the service, the value of opportunity. And I'll tell you, the one thing that, I find unique about our department, and that I, again, sort of present that to other folks. If they've never worked somewhere else, they don't necessarily know it. We're so, and I consider myself really, really fortunate. I haven't worked on an ambulance here in the county because I've always been doing the emergency management aspect of it. But the fact that, so there's the fire side of things that has opportunities. There's the EMS side of things that has opportunities. Our chief has always been incredibly supportive. If you want training, what do you want? If we can send you, if we can get you covered, we're going to send you. So for me, a really good, kind of a great example is we have a mobile command unit in the county. And so when I came on, Chief Howe was like, hey, that's you. You handle that. So I had this very small team of folks that operate the mobile command unit for me. And although they are younger, they've been with the department 3 or 4 years. My two main go-to guys. There have been so many things that they've done, even before I came into my position. They did it. They weren't on the clock. They did it because they needed it. It needed to be done, and they saw value in it.
You instill belief and value.
Right. And I was like, this is fantastic. And it's, I love those guys. I can't praise them enough, but it's one of those things where I was like, that, if you go somewhere else eventually, like those are things that look really good. If you are in competition for position with other firefighter EMTs, then guess what? You get to say, oh, well, I ran and operated and maintained the county's mobile command vehicle. That sets you apart. And so that's the thing that I like to say, hey, here, there's so many opportunities. These opportunities, can set you apart in the future, or open doors. And again, I think it's interesting sometimes that people just don't necessarily remind folks of that, or go, hey, have you thought about this? And I guess, again, sometimes I feel like that's the mom in me coming out, because, although I don't want people to go anywhere else, I also, I do want, while anybody that's here, while they're here, as long as we've got them, it's, there's a saying, I think it is, basically train and equip your folks so that they can leave, but treat them in a manner that they don't want to leave.
Yes.
So.
Yes. That was, And one though is a leadership book I read a long time ago. It was interviews and discussions with 10 different leaders at the time. And this wasn't the IBM one, but IBM had a big leader then, whatever. But one of the quotes was, you make yourself indispensable by making yourself dispensable. You make everybody around you be able to do your job. And what ends up really happening, at least in the corporate world, is now you made little chiefs that go on to be big chiefs somewhere else. Right. And you're spreading the legacy, if you will. Mm-hmm. And your company will never want you to go, because even though they could replace you with somebody younger or newer, excuse me, that you trained them and you're the value.
Right.
And then you made it to where you don't have to be there. You can move into a newer area or pioneer something else or do something different. And that is amazing. And I hear what I had a little bit of too. If you have, it takes the chiefs and the bosses, the owners of companies to say, I'm going to put value into you. You want to take that class? Go take that class.
Exactly.
And the inference is, hopefully you'll bring it back here
right.
and use it here. Too many times, there's classes that I wanted to take that the EMS or fire chief or corporate owner went, nah, I'm not paying for that. It's like, fine, give me the day off then. I'll go do it myself.
Exactly.
And hopefully, obviously, I don't work for them anymore. And it is, like you said, you need somebody not just making the opportunity to say yes, but to show the people, oh, you can do this. Mm-hmm. I mean, there's all these benefits you can have. And if, in my opinion, and you're welcome to weigh in this, to know one of the big problems in EMS is retention.
Right.
Right? And too many people, they look for that bottom dollar. You know, I can make 10 cents more an hour over here, but why?
Right.
You know, what are you giving up? That's what you're not looking at. What are you giving up to go do that? What's unforeseen that you're not seeing? How do you, if you see that, like people are starting to leave because I'm not that they do it for Richmond Hill, but you mentioned that Richmond Hill's offering a sign-on bonus of $1,000. Well, I'm just going to get $1,000. How do you then say, well, we're not obviously showing the value of what we're offering. How do you change that perspective?
I think that is, therein lies the challenge. Because I think at the end of the day, people's thought processes are, you'll have people that are basically in something for the long haul. They're going to stick with it when the times when the times are a little more challenging, when the times are a little bit easier. And then you have the folks, I think, that are always looking for that next best thing. And I think that manifests in the folks, like if you were to look at, if somebody was to present a resume to you, it's those folks that, oh, here you've got, 10 jobs in 2 years versus, so I don't, I always and sometimes I don't have to say anything. For instance, the conversation that, some of us were having this morning, that was, and it was sort of a little bit of a, round table-esque discussion of, oh, well, these people are doing this, and this person, well, this department's doing this, and this is why people are going to go here. And, I just kind of sit back and I listen a little bit, but then we have some of the folks that came from other services that were like, oh, dude, do you look around, look at the equipment that we have here. Look at, we're almost at a place where our oldest ambulance is no more than 2 years old. We've got all of this equipment that we've, apparatus that and so sometimes it's some of your, more senior members of the staff. You really don't even have to offer much insight because they're really quick to, because they've come from other places.
Yeah.
And I think where you see that most often, or in my experience, is some of the younger folks coming up that haven't necessarily worked for other services. And so, it's really common for departments like for fire and EMS or fire departments to do like their own rookie schools. So we have folks that have never been in public safety. They've never been in fire service, and we bring them in, we put them through a rookie school, fire school, and then we're going to roll them into an EMT class. So, there's a lot of attractive things out there for folks that, if they don't know any better or they don't have that perspective, it's very alluring.
Yeah.
But then, leave it to some of the guys who have been in the business a little bit and go, hey, but you should go look at what you have to work with. You should go, oh, have you ever thought about their call volume? Have you ever, is it really worth it in the end? So sometimes I think there's so much value, from perspective brought to the table from other folks that have been here for a little bit. They've worked for other services. They can compare.
Yeah. Recently, this past spring and summer, AMR and Grady both offered huge sign-on packages. And instead of poo-pooing it or running it down, when a lot of people were talking to me about it, I'd say, the only question I'd ask is, what do you have to do for it?
Right.
What kind of contract do you sign it? Have you ever worked for them before? Because that's important. When you're talking about, I could do 2 years, every place is different. Yeah, you might not. We always come from the perspective that we sit at. Because I have a lot of kids that come out of school. I call them kids, but they come out of school.
Me too.
Yeah, I hire them. Well, I mean, I'm in my early 40s. They're not kids, but for career-wise.
Right,
I've been in this
exactly.
for half of my life.
That's exactly it.
Right? And it's like, dude, you're just getting into this, kid. You don't know.
Right, exactly.
And I have some people just don't have that perspective, and they're giving some attitude. And I've told my managers, like I said, timing's everything. If I had been in my office and heard that comment come out of somebody's mouth, that I hired straight out of school and made them a driver first while they got their numbers and during the COVID rules. And then they got their numbers, and we paid them the same as we pay everybody. We have a set level of pay of what we give for a position, which is high. And it's like you earned double what you would have at any other place as a brand new EMT.
Right.
And you're going to give me attitude? I would have pulled them in and read them right at. Managers handle it perfectly. You know,
right.
they try to paint a better picture. Because I understand his perspective, but I was about to give him a hard perspective.
Right. And it's tough, it's tough. And that's,
right.
I think that's another challenge is to, my experiences and the love and adoration that I have for this department in this county is very different than some people's. And that's just because for me personally, it's been a lot of work and some uncertainty along the way. I just decided I can't do nursing. What could I possibly do? I got really fortunate, ended up in a class at Texas A&M Extension out in College Station. And it was an incident management class. And I probably had zero reason to be there, but somebody fudged some stuff on a paper to say, she knows what she's doing. And so I end up in this class and I'm completely overwhelmed by the fourth day where you spent nothing but 4 days simulating, managing incidences. I was like, it was like my aha moment. I was like, this is it. This is the answer to what am I going to do to get off of 24, 48, 96 hour shifts and, backbreaking work and all of this kind of stuff. And so for me, it's been, it was working full time while my children as a single mom, still kind of raising my children and then starting school myself and, so many things. So to be where I am, it is sometimes challenging to have that separation when people say, oh, well, I'm just going to go to so-and-so because what you want to do is your sort of natural instinct is to just jump like, hey, wait a minute, let me tell you something. Yeah. So I have to okay, Summer, everybody isn't necessarily as passionate as you are. And, but again, I didn't even this morning, for instance, before I could even offer different perspective. And that's kind of how I see it is, like you, I just turned 46, but I've literally been in EMS or some form of public safety more than half of my life. So before I could offer perspective, and that's what I feel like is kind of my gift is I have a gift of perspective. I've done, I've done county 911. I've done private service. I've kind of done the gamut of, because although my full-time job was pretty much unchanged, you have so much time. I had all of these part-time jobs over the years. So I feel like I have a lot of perspective, even so much so at one point when I was we did 24/72s where I worked. On my weekends off, I went up to Grady and worked part-time some at Grady because I have a sister that lives in Atlanta. So before I had this morning, before I had it really is, but before I had the opportunity to even offer my comments or my perspective or somebody else who again has worked for another service who has a lot of, great points of, hey, let me tell you why this place is a really good place to be. So it is, but it is challenging to not, immediately go and Summer.
and that's why I believe in timing. It's
absolutely.
It came at a time that I didn't get to snatch you. So then I got to make a nice, polite video about it. And bring it up on interviews like this, where other people can get the value of that perspective without having damaging the person that gave it to me.
Exactly.
So we've got 4 questions that I like to end with. And it's just whatever comes to mind. Okay. Easy peasy. And it speaks volumes to what you guys do here at Bryan County, that You didn't need talking points. You didn't need, I didn't even know I was going to talk to you today. We talked to the chief, like, hey, we got this great new director. You want to talk to her? And he just went in and told you, you're next. And that's it. And because when you build a value system, you don't have to grip and control. And so what you guys are doing here are amazing, is that just flows and we can just talk. And you're really great at talking. And I think that's a new world. We talk a lot. So I'm going to end with what we do with One EMS. But 4 questions I got for you, whatever comes to mind first. What do you love about being an EMS?
I will always just love the ability to help others. It's, it's kind of this, it sounds so, and I've said this all of my EMS career, it sounds so cliche but genuinely I mean it. Like I feel like having the knowledge, having the ability, having that strength to help others, that's what I love about it.
That's awesome. What's one of the biggest changes you've seen in EMS that either you're a part of or just saw that, man, that really needed to happen?
Gosh, that's a tough question. That's a really challenging question. I wish that would probably have been one to spend some time thinking on.
We'll come back to it. I got another one.
Do that. Yeah, because
What's one of the biggest problems you're facing right now in EMS? Or EMS fire? I mean, when I say EMS, I know it's separate, but it has really become more of one thing nowadays.
Right.
So in the public safety that we deal with medicine, what's one of the biggest challenges that you're seeing?
What I've started sort of noticing, challenge. I hate to say staffing because that sounds so vague and it's so almost empty and shallow. And I mean more than just, filling spots. I think it's finding those folks that see this sort of as a calling. They want to find like their home.
Sure.
And they're sort of, and we get that, that level of commitment and dedication that leads to longevity. So to say staffing is kind of, like I said, it sounds so cheap and so shallow, but I guess, again, just finding folks that are looking for a place to make home that they commit to, and that it's not that just jump for that next, well, I'm leaving here because I can get 15 cents more an hour somewhere else.
Or working 2 jobs
right.
It's a mess. All right. Let's go back to change. What's something you've seen change that you felt was really needed? I mean, you've been doing this like I have 20 something years. Definitely.
For a long time. I appreciate that there are probably more opportunities now, and I don't want to isolate it and just say that for women, but to me, I feel like back, in the late 90s when I started, in the early 2000s, you and I could probably talk for days about, it was basically just kind of, you went to work and there wasn't necessarily a lot of opportunities.
No, there really wasn't.
And now you can look at, there are the intensive care paramedic programs, flight medicine that used to be such an exclusive, club that, nobody I knew was a flight paramedic. Nobody I knew, was and so those opportunities. So that's one of the things that I think is, just there's so much more opportunity now.
Yeah. I tell my kids, that all the time. It's like, when I came up, it was work 2 911 jobs. There wasn't non-emergency, but now you got non-emergency transport. That still does the ALS and BLS stuff from the hospitals. You got non-emergency that just does easy jobs that people still need help in. Movie sets, event medicine.
Right, absolutely. That's such a big thing now. And
doctors' offices now are really recognizing what we can do.
It's just that 20 years ago, I wasn't like it night and day different.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah. So the last thing I'll ask you is One EMS. We are trying to bridge that gap between the person coming into the field, boots on the ground, this is the only opportunity, to educating citizens on what we do, to educating the top end, the senators and the state level people on what goes on, and bring everybody together. So with that brief little explanation in mind of what One EMS is, what is one thing that one EMS could do for you in your goals of bringing people together?
And I think basically just, exactly what you said. I think sometimes, for the longest time, I felt like the ceiling for EMS in terms of representation and voices is that ceiling's been very low. And sometimes your voice, you don't feel like your voice is any more than can be spoken locally. So to me, having the ability to raise that ceiling and a louder voice and a larger platform that potentially, is more audible, more, becomes more well known, more attention, the ability to gain more attention, that to me would be invaluable.
That's awesome. All right. Well, thank you, Chief Patterson.
Thank you.
And you are, Summer was a name that you're born with, and you're radiant like the summer. I love the energy coming out. Thank you for talking with me today. Thank you for Bryan County for letting us do the interviews out here. Because these kind of conversations, bringing our voice to be represented is important, because conversations bring people together, and together we are one EMS.